Tony Ferguson took his losing streak to 5 in a row earlier this month as he went up against departing fan favorite Nate Diaz. Ferguson was caught in a guillotine, which for a man with the jiu-jitsu smarts he has, really shouldn't have happened. However, he believes he knows where it all went wrong. Today, we are discussing Ferguson revealing what he would have done differently against Diaz. Stay right where you are. Let's get straight into it then. What did Tony have to say? Well, the MMA world was shocked at UFC 279 recently as Nate Diaz was able to lock in a guillotine choke on Tony Ferguson. El Cucuy is one of the most well-rounded BJJ practitioners in the entire UFC, so for him to get caught in a guillotine in the manner he did was actually pretty shocking. Ferguson was meant to take on Li Jingliang, but the card had to be reshuffled after Khamzat Chimaev's egregious weight miss, with Ferguson going head-to-head with Nate in a battle of the legends. Of course, it didn't work out too well for Tony, who after the fight revealed that he should have kept the fight on the feet. He went on to say, "Little details to expand on and to grow from. Nate is a game fighter. I can't say anything else. It's not like he's old and slow and stuff. Hopefully the crowd that was at UFC 279 there present got some blood spattered on them or something. I had fun in there." Tony's form of late is extremely concerning. His poor run began after being knocked out by Justin Gaethje back in 2020, before going on to lose to future champion Charles Oliveira. He then dropped consecutive L's to Beneil Dariush and famously Michael Chandler, before also being beaten by Nate last time out. What do you guys make of Tony's assessment of his loss to Nate? Let us know below. What else did Ferguson have to say then? Let's see. Well, he did go on to reveal that he knows he isn't the fighter he once was anymore, which is probably one of the only positives we can take from the current Tony Ferguson situation. We have seen guys carry on far too long and suffer KO after KO far too often, so hopefully Tony gives it up before he does some serious damage to himself. He went on to speak about his recent move to welterweight, saying, "I hang my hat at two different places besides home, at 155 and at 70, before adding that he hasn't fought at 170 in around a decade. Before this, he pointed out, he was 14-2 with mostly knockouts, then adding, "My body literally just got used to it. I fought in May, I lifted heavy, I was taking some weight gainer protein, doing it right. I enjoyed it. My fans, the supporters, family and fans first. It's a different me out there, and it's a different me right now." Ferguson's last win came against another legendary figure, Donald Cerrone, who himself recently retired after dropping the majority of fights he was involved in towards the back end of his career. Tony would do well to follow Cowboy's lead, as we all want to remember the Tony Ferguson who was once spoken of in the same breath as Khabib Nurmagomedov, not the punching bag he is running a serious risk of becoming. Do you think it's time for Tony to call it? Next up, Michael Chandler has offered Tony a word of advice. Stay tuned. Ferguson was flatlined by Chandler earlier this year after a front kick to the face, which will be shown on highlight reels for years to come. However, Mike has revealed recently that he is a little concerned about Tony's short-term health and believes he should take some time off to rest up some. Speaking on the MMA Hour earlier this month, Chandler told Helwani that he thinks Tony needs a prolonged period on the sidelines, but was quick to reveal he didn't want to tell a man what to do with his career. Iron Mike then revealed that he is actually a bigger fan of Ferguson. I mean, who isn't? Saying that he has been an absolute ridiculous joy to watch over the last however many years he's been in the UFC, before explaining that coming up against him was an opportunity he was glad was presented to him. Of course, it worked out well for Chandler, but Ferguson had looked sharp in the first round of their fight. Mike also acknowledged that Tony might have been winning the Nate fight before he was caught, but he still thinks he needs some time out. He finished by saying, "It's pretty crazy that he fought this past weekend. I'm not fighting for 9 weeks, and he was the one who lost consciousness in our fight. So definitely take some time off. Let your body heal a bit." What do you guys think? Tony has also hit back at DC's retirement claims now. Stay with us. Just before Tony's 5th defeat in as many fights, former champ Daniel Cormier claimed that Tony Ferguson was done, and that assessment is difficult to disagree with when you look at the manner of his defeats. I mean, one of the worst knockouts of all time, followed by a submission that prime Tony Ferguson would have been embarrassed to get caught in, appears to back up Cormier's point. Following the loss to Nate, Tony said, "When I feel like I'm ready to retire, I will retire," before adding that now isn't the time. Ferguson couldn't resist taking a personal dig at DC either, saying that he had never cheated to get on the scales to retain my championship like DC. Of course, this is in reference to the Anthony Johnson fight, where Cormier relieved the scale a few ounces by grabbing the towel which had been put in place to cover his modesty. El Cucuy then went on to say, "This guy wants to call it out, I'm going to call you right back out. You don't have to be an expletive to the people that actually work hard," before saying that he had given everything to the sport. Of course, it's difficult for Ferguson to see that DC's words probably come from a place of concern, but once the dust settles, possibly after he eventually calls it a career, he will probably come to the realization that a lot of people are simply concerned for his well-being. Next up, Tony has suggested Khabib could return to fight him. Khabib Nurmagomedov retired back in 2020 following his title defense against Justin Gaethje. However, he only defended the title 3 times, which has led to many people suggesting that the Eagle shouldn't be considered in any and all GOAT debates. He was supposed to fight Tony Ferguson on no fewer than 5 occasions, but for one reason or another, the bout was cancelled every time. But now, El Cucuy has claimed that the Russian would come out of retirement to face him. Revealing to fans that he is the one to tempt Khabib back to the octagon, Ferguson went on to say that dude's not retired. Tony then went a bit deeper, suggesting that Khabib is right to have taken time out following the death of his father, before saying that before he passed, Nurmagomedov Sr. had claimed that the fight to make was between his son and Ferguson. As we all well know, Khabib has promised his mother that he is done fighting, so unless Tony knows something we don't, we can't see him coming back. I mean, he would have done so already if so, right? However, he is still active and often seen training alongside lightweight challenger Islam Makhachev, so he is almost certainly still at a decent level of fitness, and it probably wouldn't take much to get him back to where he once was fitness-wise. What do you make of Tony's claims? And finally, new footage has emerged of Nate soon after the Ferguson fight. Stay with us for this. Shortly after Nate submitted Tony at UFC 279, audio footage emerged of Diaz admitting to getting tired. He was visibly seen to be taking time out up against the cage during the final round, so it probably won't come as much of a surprise to most that Diaz admitted to being tired. But as a fighter with one of the best engines in the game, it might be a signal that the great Nathan Diaz is coming to the end. Shortly after the fight, Diaz said, "He wasn't wrestling. The whole camp I didn't punch, I was doing wrestling, so I was getting tired throwing those punches." As we know, Nate was supposed to take on Khamzat Chimaev in what many have suggested would have been an incredibly one-sided fight in favor of the Russian, and given the pace he fights at, Nate can probably count himself lucky that he came in overweight. What do you guys make of Diaz's revelation, and where do you see him ending up next? As usual, thanks for stopping by today, and remember to tune in again next time when we will be discussing all sorts of other cool bits and pieces. And why not do us a big favor by liking and sharing today's video, whilst also subscribing to our channel so you don't miss out on more fun content in future. Bye guys!